Okay, and we are back. Hello everyone. If you are stumbling upon this video, you are either a random person, in that case I'm very sorry, but do stick around if any of the things on the screen interest you. If they don't, feel free to click off, and maybe I'll see you another time. But more likely is you're reading my manifesto and have clicked on the links that I have provided for you for the indictments. Thank you for actually going through the links, as you should. Now, if you've watched any of the other parts as well, you know we are going into the United States of America v. Donald J. Trump indictment, also commonly known as the Jack Smith January 6 indictment against Donald Trump. So, as with every other one, we'll go through the sources, the background, the charges, the post-indictment, and the conclusion and final statements. So, let's start. Just as with every indictment, my sources for this are the indictment themselves and the corresponding Wikipedia page. As I say within all these videos, do not be bashing me for using Wikipedia, as it is very useful when obtaining the background. Now, time to get into this. Background. Trump routinely questioned the results of the 2020 election through claims of election fraud via mail-in ballots, voting machine irregularities, dead voters, and other irregularities. He also directly attempted to overturn the result of the election through a plot where pro-Trump slates of fake electors would be created. I'm just messing up right here, alright. Trump pressured then Vice President Mike Pence to count the fake electors instead of the electors certified by state legislators. As ballots were being counted, campaign data expert Matt Oczkowski bluntly informed Trump that he was going to lose the election. White House counsel Pat Cipollone told him that invalidating the results of the election would be, quote, murder-suicide pact. Under then Attorney General William Barr, the DOJ failed to find widespread voter fraud in the election. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, predicted that Trump voters would erupt in, quote, rage, a sentiment shared by House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, who told Laura Ingraham on the Ingraham Angle that Republicans should not, quote, be silent about this. On January 6, at Trump's urge, Trump supporters stormed and broke into the Capitol building, stalling the certification of the election and causing the deaths of 5 people. Trump repeatedly refused to tell his supporters to go home within multiple tweets and was watching the whole event live in a private room. Within this time, Trump was urged by many of his biggest supporters and even own family to call off the attack, and only after hours of the initial assault did Trump deliver a video telling his supporters to go home. The January 6th Capitol attack resulted in hundreds of criminal proceedings. The House of Representatives voted to impeach Trump for a second time on January 13th, though he was acquitted by the Senate on February 13th. The House of Representatives voted to create a select committee to investigate the attack in June 2021. Ahead of its final report, the committee voted to accuse Trump of the 4 charges and referred him to the DOJ. The DOJ opened an investigation in January 2022 into the plot, expanding it to encompass January 6. In November 2022, Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed Jack Smith to lead a special counsel investigation encompassing the investigations into attempts to overturn the election and Trump's handling of government documents. On November 18, 2022, Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed Jack Smith to serve as special counsel for the January 6 investigation and the FBI investigation into Donald Trump's handling of classified government documents. In June 2023, Trump was indicted in connection with the classified documents investigation. Leading up to Trump's indictment in the January 6 investigation, prosecutors continued investigating several strands, including through hundreds of documents provided by former New York Police Department Burnett Kurik. On July 18th, Trump was given a target letter. The following week, his lawyers met with prosecutors, signaling the investigation was nearly complete. On August 1st, 2023, a grand jury indicted Trump in the District of Columbia, U.S. District Court on 4 charges for his conduct following the 2020 presidential election through the January 6 Capitol attack: conspiracy to defraud the United States under the Title 18 of the United States Code, obstructing an official proceeding, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, and conspiracy against rights under the Enforcement Act of 1870. D.C. District Judge Tanya S. Chutkan was randomly assigned to hear the case. The indictment mentioned 6 unnamed co-conspirators. Trump appealed at an arraignment on August 3rd, where he pleaded not guilty. That is all the background, and now, the charges. Count 1. 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the United States, 18 U.S.C. Section 371. 18 U.S.C. Section 371. When two or more persons conspire either to commit any offense against the United States or to defraud the United States or any agency thereof in any manner or for any purpose, and one or more of such persons do any act to effect the object of the conspiracy. Count 1. Introduction. The defendant, Trump, was the 45th President of the United States and a candidate for re-election in 2020 and lost. Despite this, Trump was determined to remain in power, so for more than 2 months following Election Day, Trump spread lies that there had been outcome-determinative fraud in the election, that he had actually won. These claims were false, and the defendant knew that they were false, but the defendant repeatedly and widely disseminated them anyway to make his knowingly false claims appear legitimate, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger, and erode public faith in the administration of the election. Trump had a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim, falsely, that there had been outcome-determinative fraud during the election and that he had won. He was also entitled to formally challenge the results of the election through lawful and appropriate means, such as by seeking recounts or audits of the popular vote in states or filing lawsuits challenging ballots and procedures. Indeed, in many cases, Trump did pursue these methods of contesting the election results. His efforts to change the outcome in any state, through recounts, audits, or legal challenges, were uniformly unsuccessful. Shortly after Election Day, Trump also pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election results. In so doing, Trump perpetrated 3 criminal conspiracies. A conspiracy to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impale, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government, in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 371. B. A conspiracy to corruptly obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding of which the collective results of the presidential election are counted and certified, the certification proceeding, in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 1512K. And C. A conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one's vote counted in violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 241. Each of these conspiracies, which built on the widespread mistrust the defendant was creating through pervasive and destabilizing lies about election fraud, targeted the bedrock function of the United States federal government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election, the federal government function. Count 1. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, 18 U.S.C. Section 371. The conspiracy. From on or about November 14, 2020, through on or about January 20, 2021, in the District of Columbia and elsewhere, Trump did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators, known and unknown to the grand jury, to defraud the United States by using dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to impale, obstruct, and defeat the lawful federal government function by which the results of the presidential election are collected, counted, and certified by the federal government. Purpose of the conspiracy. The purpose of the conspiracy was to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to obstruct the federal government function by which those results are collected, counted, and certified. Trump's co-conspirators. The defendant enlisted co-conspirators to assist him in his criminal efforts to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election and retain power. Among them were co-conspirator 1, an attorney who was willing to spread knowingly false claims and pursue strategies that the defendant's 2020 re-election campaign attorneys would not. B. Co-conspirator 2, an attorney who devised and attempted to implement a strategy to leverage the vice president's ceremonial role overseeing the certification, pertaining to obstruct the certification of the presidential election. This person is, we'll go over who they likely are at the end. C. Co-conspirator 3, an attorney whose unfounded claims of election fraud the defendant privately acknowledged to others sounded crazy. Nonetheless, the defendant embraced and publicly amplified co-conspirator 3's disinformation. D. Co-conspirator 4, a Justice Department official who worked on civil matters and who, with the defendant, attempted to use the Justice Department to open sham election crime investigations and influence state legislators with knowingly false claims of election fraud. E. Co-conspirator 5, an attorney who assisted in devising and attempting to implement a plan to submit fraudulent states of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceeding. And F. Co-conspirator 6, a political consultant who helped implement a plan to submit federal fraudulent states of presidential electors to obstruct the certification proceeding. Now, who these people are, technically it is not officially known, but we know pretty well. Co-conspirator 1 is likely Rudy Giuliani, Trump's personal lawyer, who helped him throughout a lot of this stuff, and we will talk about him a bunch, especially in the Georgia case. Co-conspirator 2, that is likely either Kenneth Chesebro or John Eastman. It's one of those two. Co-conspirator 3, that would be Sidney Powell. We know this because the privately acknowledging that the claims were crazy was brought up in the Dominion suit for Sidney Powell. So, we know that. The DOJ official, I'm pretty sure that this is Jeffrey Clark. We will get into him later, and I probably talked about him during my January 6th section in my manifesto for the DOJ. Co-conspirator 5, that is also either Kenneth Chesbro or John Eastman. Honestly, I'm pretty sure the co-conspirator 2, was the Eastman, and then co-conspirator 5 is Chesbro, based on what I know. And then the co-conspirator 6 is someone. Political consultant helped implement a plan to admit fraudulent states. That could be, honestly, anyone. I can't think of anyone at the moment. But ignoring that, just kind of keep those names in mind, because they will also come up later in the Georgia indictment. So, the federal government function. The federal government function by which the results of the election for President of the United States are collected, counted, and certified was established through the Constitution and the Electoral Count Act, ECA, a federal law enacted in 1887. The Constitution provided that individuals called electors selected the president, and that each state determined for itself how to appoint their electors apportioned to it. Through state laws, each of the 50 states and the District of Columbia choose to select their electors based on the popular vote in the state. After Election Day, the ECA required each state to formally determine or ascertain the electors who would represent the state's voters by casting electoral votes on behalf of the candidate who had won the popular vote, and required the executive of each state to certify to the federal government the identities of those electors. Then, on a date set by the ECA, each state's ascertained electors were required to meet and collect the results of the presidential election. That is, to cast electoral votes based on their state's popular vote, and to send their electoral votes, along with the state's executive certification that they were the state's legitimate electors, to the U.S. Congress to be counted and certified in an official proceeding. Finally, the Constitution and ECA required that on the 6th of January, following Election Day, the Congress meet in a joint session for a certification proceeding, presided over by the Vice President, as President of the Senate, to count the electoral votes, resolve any objections, and announce the results, thus certifying the winner of the presidential election as President-elect. This federal government function from the point of ascertain to the certification is foundational to the United States democratic process, and until 2021 had operated in a peaceful and orderly manner for more than 130 years. Manner and means. Trump's conspiracy to impale, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function through dishonesty, fraud, and deceit include the following manner and means. A. The defendant and co-conspirators used knowingly false claims of election fraud to get state legislators and election officials to subvert the legitimate election results and change electoral votes for Trump's opponent, Joseph R. Biden Jr. to electoral votes for the defendant. That is, on the pretext of baseless fraud claims, Trump pushed officials in certain states to ignore the popular vote, disenfranchise millions of voters, dismiss legitimate electors, and ultimately cause the ascertainment of and voting by illegitimate electors in favor of Trump. B. Trump and co-conspirators organized fraudulent states of electors in 7 targeted states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, attempting to mimic the procedures that the legitimate electors were supposed to follow under the Constitution and other federal and state laws. This included causing the fraudulent electors to meet on the day appointed by federal law in which legitimate electors would gather and cast their votes, cast fraudulent votes for Trump, and sign certificates falsely representing that they were legitimate electors. Some fraudulent electors were tricked into participating based on the understanding that their votes would be used only if Trump succeeded in outcome-determinative lawsuits within their state, with which the defendant never did. Trump and co-conspirators then caused these fraudulent electors to transmit their false certifications to the Vice President and other government officials to be accounted at the certification proceeding on January 6. C. Trump and co-conspirators attempted to use the power and authority of the Justice Department to conduct sham election crime investigations and to send a letter to the targeted states that falsely claimed that the Justice Department had identified significant concerns that may have impacted the election outcome, that sought to advance the defendant's fraudulent elector plan by using the Justice Department's authority to falsely present the fraudulent electors as a valid alternative to the legitimate electors, and that urged, on behalf of the Justice Department, the targeted states' legislators to convene to create the opportunity to choose the fraudulent electors over the legitimate electors. D. Trump and co-conspirators attempted to enlist the vice president to use his ceremonial role at the January 6 certification proceeding to fraudulently alter the election results. First, using knowingly false claims of election fraud, the defendant and co-conspirators attempted to convince the vice president, Mike Pence, to use Trump's fraudulent electors, reject legitimate electoral votes, or send legitimate electoral votes to state legislators for review rather than counting them. When that failed, on the morning of January 6, Trump and co-conspirators repeated knowingly false claims of election fraud to gathered supporters, falsely told them that Mike Pence had the authority to and might alter the election results, and directed them to the Capitol to obstruct the certification proceeding and exert pressure on the vice president to take the fraudulent actions he had previously refused. E. After it became public on the afternoon of January 6 that the vice president would not fraudulently alter the election results, a large and angry crowd, including many individuals whom Trump had deceived into believing the vice president could and might change the election results, violently attacked the Capitol and halted the proceeding. As violence ensued, Trump and co-conspirators exploited the disruption by redoubling efforts to levy claims of election fraud and convince members of Congress to further delay the certification based on those claims. If you can't tell, this is sounding really bad for Trump right about now. The defendant's knowledge of the falsity of his election fraud claims. This is a big one. Trump, his co-conspirators, and their agents made knowingly false claims that there had been outcome-determinative fraud at the 2020 presidential election. These prolific lies about election fraud include dozens of specific claims that there had been substantial fraud in certain states, such as that large numbers of dead, non-resident, non-citizen, or otherwise ineligible voters had cast ballots, or that voting machines had changed votes for the defendant to votes for Biden. These claims were false, and Trump knew that they were false. In fact, the defendant was notified repeatedly that his claims were untrue, often by the people on whom he rallied for candid advice on important matters, and who were best positioned to know the facts, and he deliberately regarded the truth. For instance, this is going to take a bit. Trump's VP, who personally stood to gain by remaining in office as part of the defense ticket, and whom Trump asked to study fraud allegations, told Trump that he had seen no evidence of outcome-determinative fraud. B. The senior leaders of the Justice Department, appointed by Trump and responsible for investigating credible allegations of election crimes, told Trump on multiple occasions the various allegations of fraud were unsupported. C. The Director of National Intelligence, Trump's principal advisor on intelligence matters related to national security, disabused Trump of the notion that the intelligence community's findings regarding foreign interference would change the outcome of the election. D. The Department of Homeland Security's Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, whose existence Trump signed into law to protect the nation's cybersecurity infrastructure from attack, joined an official multi-agency statement that there was no evidence any voting systems had been compromised, and that declared the 2020 election, quote, the most secure in American history, end quote. Days later, after the CISA director, whom Trump had appointed, announced publicly that election security experts were in agreement that claims of computer-based election fraud were unsubstantiated, Trump fired him. E. Senior White House attorneys selected by Trump to provide him candid advice informed him that there was no evidence of outcome-determinative election fraud, and told him that his presidency would end on Inauguration Day in 2021. F. Senior staffers on Trump's 2020 re-election campaign, defendant's campaign, or campaign, whose sole mission was Trump's re-election, told Trump on November 7, 2020, that he had only a 5 to 10% chance of prevailing in the election, and that success was contingent on Trump winning outgoing vote counts or litigation in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Within a week of that assessment, Trump lost in Arizona, meaning he had lost the election. G. State legislators and officials, many of whom were Trump's political allies, had voted for him and wanted him to be re-elected, repeatedly informed Trump that his claims of fraud in those states were unsubstantiated or false, and resisted his pressure to act based upon them. H. State and federal courts, the neutral arbiters responsible for ensuring the fair and even-handed administration of election laws, rejected every outcome-determinative post-election lawsuit filed by Trump, his co-conspirators, and allies, providing the defendant real-time notice that his allegations were meritless. Trump widely disseminated his false claims of election fraud for months, despite the fact that he knew and in many cases had been informed directly that they were not true. Trump's knowingly false statements were integral to his criminal plans to defeat the federal government function, obstruct the certification, and interfere with others' rights to vote and have their votes counted. He made these knowingly false claims throughout the post-election time period, including those below that he made immediately before the attack on the Capitol on January 6. A. Trump insinuated that more than 10,000 dead voters had voted in Georgia. Just 4 days earlier, Georgia's Secretary of State had explained to Trump that this was false. B. Trump asserted that there had been 205,000 more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. Trump's acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General had explained to him that this was false. C. Trump said that there had been a suspicious vote dump in Detroit, Michigan. Trump's Attorney General had explained to him that this was false, and his allies in the Michigan State Legislature, the Speaker of the House of Representatives and Majority Leader of the Senate, had publicly announced that there was no evidence of substantial fraud in the state. D. Trump claimed that there had been tens of thousands of double votes and other fraud in Nevada. The Nevada Secretary of State had previously rebutted the defendant's fraud claims by publicly posting a, quote, facts versus myths, end quote, document explaining that Nevada judges had reviewed and rejected them, and the Nevada Supreme Court had rendered a decision denying such claims. E. Trump said that more than 30,000 non-citizens had voted in Arizona. Trump's own campaign manager had explained to him that such claims were false, and the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, who had supported Trump in the election, had issued a public statement that there was no evidence of substantial fraud in Arizona. F. Trump asserted that voting machines in various contested states had switched voters from him to Biden. Trump's Attorney General, acting Attorney General, and acting Deputy Attorney General all had explained to him that this was false, and numerous recounts and audits had confirmed the accuracy of voting machines. Still, Trump continued to push these baseless and false claims. The criminal agreement enacts to affect the object of the conspiracy. The defendant's use of deceit to get state officials to subvert the legitimate election results and change electoral votes. Shortly after Election Day, which fell on November 3, 2020, Trump launched his criminal scheme. On November 13th, his campaign attorneys conceded in court that he had lost the vote count in the state of Arizona, meaning, based on the assessment Trump's campaign advisors had given him just a week earlier, he had lost the election. So the next day, he turned to co-conspirator 1, whom he announced would spearhead his efforts going forward to challenge the election results. From that point on, Trump and his co-conspirators executed a strategy to use knowing deceit in the targeted states to impale, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function, including as described below. Arizona. On November 13, 2020, Trump had a conversation with his campaign manager, who informed him that a claim that had been circulating that a substantial number of non-citizens had voted in Arizona was false. On November 22nd, 8 days before Arizona's governor certified the ascertainment of the state's legitimate electors based on the popular vote, Trump and co-conspirator 1 called the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives and made knowingly false claims of election fraud aimed at interfering with the ascertainment of voting by Arizona's electors as follows. A. Trump and co-conspirator 1 falsely asserted, among other things, that a substantial number of non-citizens, non-residents, and dead people had voted fraudulently in Arizona. The Arizona House Speaker asked co-conspirator 1 for evidence of the claims, which co-conspirator 1 did not have, but claimed he would provide, and co-conspirator 1 never did so. B. Trump and co-conspirator 1 asked the Arizona House Speaker to call the legislature into session to hold a hearing based on their claims of election fraud. The Arizona House Speaker refused, saying that doing so would require a two-thirds vote of its members and he would not allow it without actual evidence of fraud. Trump and co-conspirator 1 asked the Arizona House Speaker to use the legislature to circumvent the process by which the legitimate electors would be ascertained for Biden based on the popular vote and replace those electors with a new slate for Trump. The Arizona House Speaker refused, responding that the suggestion was beyond anything he had ever heard or thought of as something within his authority. On December 1st, co-conspirator 1 met with the Arizona House Speaker. When the Arizona House Speaker again asked co-conspirator 1 for evidence of the outcome determinative election fraud, he and the defendant have it, claiming co-conspirator 1 responded with words to the effect of, "We don't have the evidence, but we have lots of theories." On December 4th, the Arizona House Speaker issued a public statement that said, in part, quote, "No election is perfect, and if there were evidence of legal votes or an improper count, then Arizona law provides a process to contest the election, a lawsuit under state law. But the law does not authorize the legislature to reverse the results of an election. As a conservative Republican, I don't like the results of the presidential election. I voted for President Trump and worked hard to re-elect him, but I cannot and will not entertain a suggestion that we violate current law to change the outcome of a certified election. I and my fellow legislators swore an oath to support the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona. It would violate the oath, the basic principles of Republican government, and the rule of law if we attempted to nullify the people's votes based on unsupported theories of fraud. Under the laws that we wrote and voted upon, Arizona voters choose who, when, and our system requires that the choice be respected. On the morning of January 4th, 2021, co-conspirator 2 called the Arizona House Speaker to urge him to use a majority of the legislature to decertify the state's legitimate electors. Arizona's validly ascertained electors have voted 3 weeks earlier and sent their votes to Congress, which was scheduled to count those votes in Biden's favor in just 2 days' time at the January 6th certification proceeding. When the Arizona House Speaker explained that state investigations had uncovered no evidence of substantial fraud to the state, co-conspirator 2 conceded that he, quote, didn't know enough about facts on the ground, end quote, in Arizona, but nonetheless told the Arizona House Speaker to decertify and, quote, let the courts sort it out, end quote. The Arizona House Speaker refused, stating that he would not, quote, play with the oath, end quote, he had taken to uphold the United States Constitution and Arizona law. On January 6, Trump publicly repeated the knowingly false claim that 36,000 non-citizens had voted in Arizona. On November 16, 2020, on Trump's behalf, his executive assistant sent co-conspirator 3 and others a document containing bullet points critical of a certain voting machine company, writing, quote, see attached, please include as is, or almost as is, in lawsuit, end quote. Co-conspirator 3 responded 9 minutes later, writing, quote, it must go in all suits in Georgia and Pennsylvania immediately with a fraud claim that requires the entire election to be set aside. In those states, and machines empowered for non-partisan professional inspection, end quote. On November 25th, co-conspirator 3 filed a lawsuit against the governor of Georgia, falsely alleging, quote, massive election fraud, end quote, accomplished through the voting machine company's election software and hardware. If you can't tell by now, that voting machine company is Dominion. Before the lawsuit was even filed, the defendant retweeted a post promoting it. The defendant did this despite the fact that when he had discussed co-conspirator 3's far-fetched public claims regarding the voting machine company in private with advisors, the defendant had conceded that they were unsupported and that co-conspirator 3 sounded, quote, crazy, end quote. Co-conspirator 3's Georgia lawsuit was dismissed on December 7th. On December 3rd, co-conspirator 1 orchestrated a presentation to a Judiciary Subcommittee of the Georgia State Senate with the intention of misleading state senators into blocking the ascertainment of legitimate electors. During the presentation, A. An agent of the defendant and co-conspirator 1 falsely claimed that more than 10,000 dead people voted in Georgia. That afternoon, a senior advisor to the defendant told the defendant's chief of staff through text messages, quote, just an FYI, a campaign lawyer, and his team verified that the 10K supposed dead people voting in Georgia is not accurate. It was alleged in co-conspirator 1's hearing today, end quote. The senior advisor clarified that he believed that the actual number was 12. B. Another agent of the defendant and co-conspirator 1 played a misleading excerpt of a video recording of ballot counting at State Farm Arena in Atlanta and insinuated that it showed election workers counting suitcases of legal ballots. If you don't know this is a classic State Farm video that was floated around on Twitter where the woman pulls the black suitcase from under the table and starts counting votes. This will be mentioned, or already has been mentioned, in my January 6th part of my manifesto, so you've probably, if you've been clicking through the links, have already seen the video and know that that has been debunked. Co-conspirator 2 encouraged the legislators to decertify the state's legitimate electors based on false allegations of election fraud. Also on December 3rd, the defendant issued a tweet amplifying the knowingly false claims made in co-conspirator 1's presentation in Georgia. Quote, wow, blockbuster testimony taking place right now in Georgia. Ballot stuffing by Dems when Republicans were forced to leave the large counting room. Plenty more coming, but this alone leads to an easy win of the state, end quote. On December 4th, the Georgia Secretary of State's chief operating officer debunked the claims made at co-conspirator 1's presentation the previous day, issuing a tweet saying, quote, the 90-second video of election workers at State Farm Arena purporting to show fraud was watched in its entirety, hours, by Georgia Secretary of State investigators. Shows normal ballot processing. Here's the fact check on it. On December 7th, he reiterated during a press conference that the claims that had been there, that the claim that there had been misconduct at State Farm Arena was false. On December 8th, the defendant called the Georgia Attorney General to pressure him and support an election lawsuit filed in the Supreme Court by another state's Attorney General. The Georgia Attorney General told the defendant that officials had investigated various claims of election fraud at the state and were not seeing evidence to support them. Also on December 8th, a senior campaign advisor who spoke with the defendant on a daily basis and had informed him on multiple occasions that various fraud claims were untrue, expressed frustration that many of co-conspirator 1 and his legal team's claims cannot be substantiated. As early as mid-November, for instance, the senior campaign advisor had informed the defendant that his claims of a large number of dead voters in Georgia were untrue. With respect to the persistent false claim regarding State Farm Arena, on December 8th, the senior campaign advisor wrote in an email, quote, "When our research and campaign legal team can't back up any of the claims made by our elite strike force legal team, you can see why we're 0-32 in all cases. I'll obviously hustle to help on all fronts, but it's tough to own any of this when it's all just conspiracy shit beamed down from the mothership." On December 10th, 4 days before Biden's validly ascertained electors were scheduled to cast votes and send them to Congress, co-conspirator 1 appeared at a hearing before the Georgia House of Representatives Government Affairs Committee. Co-conspirator 1 played the State Farm Arena video again and falsely claimed that it showed, quote, "voter fraud right in front of people's eyes," end quote, and was, quote, "the tip of the iceberg," end quote. Then he cited 2 election workers by name, basically accusing them of, quote, "quite obviously surreptitiously passing on USB ports as if they were vials of heroin or cocaine," end quote, and suggested that they were criminals whose, quote, "places of work, their homes, should have been searched for evidence of balance, for evidence of USB ports, for evidence of voter fraud," end quote. Thereafter, the 2 election workers received numerous death threats. On December 15, Trump summoned the incoming acting attorney general, the incoming acting deputy attorney general, and others to the Oval Office to discuss allegations of election fraud. During the meeting, the Justice Department officials specifically refuted the defense claims about the State Farm Arena, explained to him that the activity shown on the tape co-conspirator 1 had used was, quote, "benign." On December 23rd, a day after Trump's chief of staff personally observed the signature verification process at the Cobb County Civic Center, and noted the defendant that state election officials were, quote, "conducting themselves in an exemplary fashion," end quote, and would find fraud if it existed, the defendant tweeted that the Georgia officials administering the signature verification process were trying to hide evidence of election fraud and were, quote, "terrible people," end quote. In a phone call on December 27th, Trump spoke with the acting attorney general and acting deputy attorney general. During the call, Trump again pressed the unfounded claims regarding the State Farm Arena, and the 2 top Justice Department officials again rebutted the allegations, telling him that the Justice Department had reviewed videotape and interviewed witnesses and had not identified any suspicious contact. On December 31st, Trump signed a verification affirming false election fraud allegations made on his behalf in a lawsuit filed in his name against the Georgia governor, Brian Kemp. In advance of the filing, co-conspirator 2, who was advising Trump in the lawsuit, acknowledged in an email that he and him had, since signing a previous verification, quote, "been made aware that some of the allegations and evidence preferred by the experts have been inaccurate," end quote, and that signing a new affirmation, quote, "with that knowledge and incorporation by reference would not be accurate," end quote. Trump and co-conspirator 2 caused Trump's signed verification to be filed nonetheless. On January 2nd, 4 days before Congress's certification proceeding, Trump and others called Georgia's Secretary of State. During the call, Trump lied to the Georgia Secretary of State to induce him to alter Georgia's popular vote count and call into question the validity of the Biden electors' votes, which had been transmitted to Congress weeks before, including as follows. This is the famous Brad Raffensperger call. There was a full version of it on YouTube that I have linked in my manifesto. So, once again, make sure you're clicking through those links. A. Trump raised allegations regarding the State Farm Arena video and repeatedly disparaged one of the same election workers that co-conspirator 1 had maligned on December 10th, using her name almost 20 times and falsely referring to her as, quote, "a professional vote scammer and hustler," end quote. In response, the Georgia Secretary of State refuted this. Quote, "You're talking about the State Farm video, and I think it's extremely unfortunate that co-conspirator 1, or his people, they sliced and diced that video and took it out of context," end quote. With the Georgia Secretary of State then offered a link to a video that would disprove co-conspirator 1's claims, Trump responded, quote, "I don't care about a link. I don't need it. I have a much better leak." Or Brad. Yeah, I think it says Brad, the original video. B. Trump asked about rumors that paper ballots cast in their election were being destroyed, and the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel explained to him that the claim had been investigated and was not true. C. Trump claimed that 5,000 dead people voted in Georgia, causing the Georgia Secretary of State to respond, quote, "Well, Mr. President, the data you have is wrong. The actual numbers were two people that were dead that voted. And so Trump's wrong. That was 2. Or your information's wrong. That was 2. Yeah. End quote. D. Trump claimed that thousands of out-of-state voters had cast ballots in Georgia's election, which the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel refuted, explaining, quote, "We've been going through each one of those as well. And those numbers that we got, that defense counsel was just saying, they're not accurate. Everyone we've been through are people that lived in Georgia, moved to a different state, but then moved back to Georgia legitimately. They moved back in years ago. This was not like something just before the election." End quote. E. In response to multiple other of Trump's allegations, the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel told him that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was examining all such claims and finding no merit to them. F. Trump said that he needed to, quote, "find 11,780 votes," and insinuated that the Georgia Secretary of State and his counsel could be subject to criminal prosecution if they failed to find election fraud, as he demanded, stating, quote, "And you're going to find that they are, which is totally illegal. It is. It's more illegal for you than it is for them, because you know what they did, and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal, that's a criminal offense, and you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you and to the Georgia Secretary of State's counsel. Your lawyer," end quote. The next day, on January 3rd, Trump falsely claimed that the Georgia Secretary of State had not addressed the defense allegations, publicly saying that the Georgia Secretary of State, quote, "was unwilling or unable to answer questions such as the ballots on the table, scam, ballot destruction, out-of-state voters dead, voters, and more. He has no clue," end quote. On January 6th, Trump publicly repeated the knowingly false insinuation that more than 10,300 dead people had voted in Georgia. Michigan. On November 5th, 2020, Trump claimed that there had been a suspicious dump of votes, purportedly illegitimate ballots, saying, quote, "In Detroit, there were hours of unexplained delay in delivering many of the votes for counting. The final batch did not arrive until 4 in the morning, and even though the polls closed at 8 o'clock, so they brought it in, and the batches came in, and nobody knew where they came from," end quote. On November 20th, 3 days before Michigan's governor signed a certificate of ascertainment notifying the federal government that, based on the popular vote, Biden's electors were to represent Michigan's voters, Trump held a meeting in the Oval Office with the Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives and the Majority Leader of the Michigan Senate. In the meeting, Trump raised his false claim, among others, of an illegitimate vote dump in Detroit. In response, the Michigan Senate Majority Leader told him that he had lost Michigan, not because of fraud, but because he had underperformed with certain voter populations in the state. Upon leaving their meeting, the Michigan House Speaker and Michigan Senate Majority Leader issued a statement reiterating this. Quote, "The Senate and House Oversight Committees are actively engaged in a thorough review of Michigan's elections process, and we have faith in the committee process to provide greater transparency and accountability to our citizens. We have not yet been made aware of any information that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan, and as legislative leaders, we will follow the law and follow the normal process regarding Michigan's electors, and as we have said throughout this election," end quote. On December 1st, Trump raised his Michigan vote dump claim with the Attorney General, who responded that what had occurred in Michigan had been the normal vote counting process and that there was no indication of fraud in Detroit. Despite this, the next day, Trump made a knowingly false statement that in Michigan, quote, "At 6:31 in the morning, a vote dump of 149,772 votes came in unexpectedly. We were winning by a lot. That batch was received in horror. Nobody knows anything about it. It's corrupt. Detroit's corrupt. I have a lot of friends in Detroit. They know it, but Detroit is totally corrupt," end quote. On December 4th, co-conspirator 1 sent a text message to the Michigan House Speaker reiterating his unsupported claim of election fraud and attempting to get the Michigan House Speaker to assist in reversing the ascertainment of the legitimate Biden electors, stating, quote, "Looks like Georgia may well hold some factual hearings and change the certification under Article Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution. As co-conspirator 2 explained, they just don't have the right to do it, but the obligation. Help me get this done in Michigan," end quote. Similarly, on December 7th, despite still having established no fraud in Michigan, co-conspirator 1 sent a text intended for the Michigan Senate Majority Leader. Quote, "So I need you to pass a joint resolution from the Michigan legislature that states that the election is in dispute. There's an ongoing investigation by the legislature, and the electors sent by Governor Whitmer are not the official electors of the state of Michigan and do not fall within the safe harbor deadline of December 8th under Michigan law," end quote. On December 14th, the day that electors in states across the country were required to vote and submit their votes to Congress like Michigan, the Michigan House Speaker and Michigan Senate Majority Leader announced that, contrary to Trump's request, they would not decertify the legitimate election results or electors in Michigan. The Michigan Senate Majority Leader's public statements include, quote, "We have not received evidence of fraud on a scale that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan," end quote. The Michigan House Speaker's public statement read, in part, quote, We've diligently examined these reports of fraud to the best of our ability. I fought hard for President Trump. Nobody wanted him to win more than me. I think that he's done an incredible job, but I love our republic too. I can't fathom risking our norms, traditions, and institutions to pass a resolution retroactively changing the electors for Trump, simply because some think there may have been enough widespread fraud to give him the win. That's unprecedented for good reason, and that's why there was not enough support in the House to cast a new slate of electors. I fear we'd lose our country forever. This treaty would bring mutually assured destruction for every future election in regards to the Electoral College, and I can't stand for that. I won't. On January 6, 2021, Trump publicly repeated his knowingly false claims regarding an illicit dump of more than 100,000 ballots in Detroit. Pennsylvania. On November 11, 2020, Trump publicly maligned a Philadelphia city commissioner for stating on the news that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in Philadelphia. As a result, the Philadelphia city commissioner and his family received death threats. On November 25th, the day after Pennsylvania's governor signed a certificate of ascertainment and thus certified to the federal government that Biden's electors were the legitimate electors for the state, Co-Conspirator 1 orchestrated an event at a hotel in Gettysburg attended by state legislators. Co-Conspirator 1 falsely claimed that Pennsylvania had issued 1.8 million absentee ballots and received 2.5 million in return. In the days thereafter, a campaign staffer wrote internally that Co-Conspirator 1's allegations was, quote, just wrong, and, quote, there's no way to defend it. The deputy campaign manager responded, quote, we have been saying this for a while. It's very frustrating, end quote. On December 4th, after 4 key Republican leaders of the Pennsylvania legislature issued a public statement that the General Assembly lacked the authority to overturn the popular vote and appoint its own slate of electors, and that doing so would violate the state electors code, and authority to overturn the popular vote and appoint its own slate of electors, and that doing so would violate the state election code and the Constitution, Trump tweeted a post labeling the legislators cowards. On December 31st and January 3rd, Trump repeatedly raised with the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General the allegation that in Pennsylvania there had been 205,000 more votes than voters. Each time, the Justice Department officials informed him that this claim was false. On January 6, 2021, Trump publicly repeated his known false claim that there had been 205,000 more votes than voters in Pennsylvania. Wisconsin. On November 29, 2020, a recount in Wisconsin that Trump's campaign had petitioned and paid for did not change the election result and, in fact, increased his margin of defeat. On December 14th, the Wisconsin Supreme Court rejected an election challenge by the campaign. One justice wrote, quote, nothing in this case casts any legitimate doubt that the people of Wisconsin lawfully chose Vice President Biden and Senator Harris to be the next leaders of our great country, end quote. On December 21st, as a result of the state Supreme Court's decision, the Wisconsin governor, who had signed a certificate of ascertainment on November 30th, identifying Biden's electors as the state's legitimate electors, signed a certificate of final determination in which he recognized that the state Supreme Court had resolved controversy regarding the appointment of Biden's electors and confirmed that Biden had received the highest number of voters in the state and that his electors were the legitimate electors. With the state's legitimate electors. That same day, in response to the court decision that had prompted the Wisconsin governor to sign the certificate of final determination, Trump issued a tweet repeating his knowingly false claims of election fraud and demanding that the Wisconsin legislature overturn the election results that had led to the ascertainment of Biden's electors as the legitimate electors. On December 27th, Trump raised with the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General a specific fraud claim that there had been more votes than voters in Wisconsin. The acting Deputy Attorney General informed him that the claim was false. On January 6, 2021, Trump publicly repeated knowingly false claims that there had been tens of thousands of unlawful votes in Wisconsin. The defendant's use of dishonesty, fraud, and deceit to organize fraudulent slates of electors and cause them to transmit false certifications to Congress. As Trump's attempts to obstruct the electoral vote through deceit of state officials met with repeated failure, beginning in early December 2020, he and co-conspirators developed a new plan to marshal individuals who would have served as his electors had he won the popular vote in 7 targeted states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and cause those individuals to make and send to the Vice President and Congress false certifications that they were the legitimate electors. Under the plan, the submission of these fraudulent slates would create a fake controversy at the certification proceeding and position Mike Pence, presiding on January 6 as President of the Senate, to supplant legitimate electors with Trump's fake electors and certify the defendant as President. The plan capitalized on ideas presented in a memoranda drafted by John Eastman, an attorney who was assisting Trump's campaign with legal efforts related to a recount in Wisconsin. The memoranda evolved over time from a legal strategy to preserve Trump's rights to a corrupt plan to subvert the federal government function by stopping Biden's elected voters from being counted and certified as follows. The November 18th memorandum, Wisconsin memo, advocated that, because of the ongoing recount in Wisconsin, Trump's electors there should meet and cast votes on December 14th, the date the ECA required appointing electors to vote to preserve the alternative of Trump's Wisconsin elected slate in the event he ultimately prevailed in the state. B. The December 6th memorandum, fraudulent elector memo, marked a sharp departure from co-conspirator 5's Wisconsin memo, advocating that the alternate electors originally conceived of to preserve rights in Wisconsin instead be used in a number of states as fraudulent electors to prevent Biden from receiving the 270 electoral votes necessary to secure the presidency on January 6. The fraudulent elector memo suggested that Trump electors in 6 purportedly contested states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, should meet and mimic as best as possible the actions of the legitimate Biden electors, and that, on January 6, the vice president should open and count the fraudulent votes, setting up a fake controversy that would derail the proper certification of Biden as president-elect. C. The December 9th memorandum, fraudulent elector instructions, consisted of co-conspirator 5's instructions on how fraudulent electors could mimic legitimate electors in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Co-conspirator 5 know that in some states it would be virtually impossible for the fraudulent electors to successfully take the steps as the legitimate electors because state law required formal participation in the process by state officials or access to official resources. The plan began in early December, and ultimately the conspirators and the Trump's campaign took the Wisconsin memo and expanded it to any state that Trump claimed was contested, even New Mexico, which is not contested, was never contested, but which he lost by more than 10% of the popular vote. This expansion was forecast by emails his chief of staff sent on December 6th, forwarding the Wisconsin memo to campaign staff and writing, quote, "We just need to have someone coordinating the electors for states," end quote. On December 6th, Trump and co-conspirator 2 called the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, RNC, to ensure that the plan was in motion. During the call, co-conspirator 2 told the chairwoman that it was important for the RNC to help Trump's campaign gather electors in targeted states, and falsely represented to her that such electors' votes would be used only if ongoing litigation in one of the states changed the results in Trump's favor. After the RNC chairwoman consulted the campaign and heard that work on gathering electors was underway, she called and reported this information to Trump, who responded approvingly. On December 7th, co-conspirator 1 received the Wisconsin memo and the fraudulent elector memo. Co-conspirator 1 spoke with co-conspirator 6 regarding attorneys who could assist in the fraudulent elector effort in the targeted states, and he received from co-conspirator 6 an email identifying attorneys in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The next day, on December 8th, co-conspirator 5 called the Arizona attorney on co-conspirator 6's list. In an email after the call, the Arizona attorney recounted his conversation with co-conspirator 5 as follows. Quote, "I just talked to the gentleman who did that memo, co-conspirator 5. His idea is based that all of us, Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, etc., have our electors send in their votes, even though the votes aren't legal under federal law because they're not signed by the governor, so that members of Congress can fight about whether they should be counted on January 6th. They could potentially argue that they're not bound by federal law because they're Congress and make the law, etc. Kind of wild creative, I'm happy to discuss. My comment to him was that I guess there's no harm to it, legally at least, i.e. we would just be sending in fake electoral votes to Pence so that someone in Congress can make an objection when they start counting votes and start arguing that the fake votes should be counted. At co-conspirator 1's direction, on December 10th, co-conspirator 5 sent to points of contact in all targeted states except Wisconsin, which had already received his memos, and New Mexico, a streamlined version of the Wisconsin memo, which did not reveal the intended fraudulent use of Trump's electors, and the fraudulent elector instructions, along with fraudulent elector certificates that he had drafted. 60. No, that's just both the actual. The next day, on December 11th, through co-conspirator 5, co-conspirator 1 suggested that the Arizona lawyer filed a petition for certiorari to the Supreme Court as a pretext to claim that litigation was pending in the state to provide cover for the convening and voting of Trump's fraudulent electors there. Co-conspirator 5 explained that co-conspirator 1 had heard from a state official and state provisional elected that, quote, it could appear treasonous for the Arizona electors to vote on Monday if there is no pending court proceeding, end quote. To manage the plan in Pennsylvania, on December 12th, co-conspirator 1, co-conspirator 5, and co-conspirator 6 participated in a conference call organized by Trump's campaign with Trump's electors in that state. When Trump's electors expressed concerns about signing certificates representing themselves as legitimate electors, co-conspirator 1 falsely assured them that the certificates would be used only if Trump succeeded in litigation. Subsequently, co-conspirator 6 circulated proposed conditional language to that effect for potential inclusion in the fraudulent electors' certificates. A campaign official cautioned not to offer the conditional language to other states because, quote, the other states are signing what he prepared. If it gets out, we change the language with Pennsylvania, it could snowball, end quote. In some cases, Trump's electors refused to participate in the plan. On December 13th, co-conspirator 5 sent co-conspirator 1 an email memorandum that further confirmed that the conspirators' plan was not to use the fraudulent electors only in the circumstance that Trump's litigation was successful in one of the target states. Instead, the plan was to falsely present the fraudulent states as an alternative to the legitimate states at Congress's certification proceeding, January 6. On December 13th, Trump asked the senior campaign advisor for an update on, quote, what was going on with the elector plan and directed him to, quote, put out a statement on electors. As a result, co-conspirator 1 directed the senior campaign advisor to join a conference call with him, co-conspirator 6, and others. When the senior campaign advisor related these developments in text messages to the deputy campaign manager, a senior advisor to Trump, and a campaign staffer, the deputy campaign manager responded, quote, here's the thing, the way that this is morphed into a crazy plan, so I don't know who wants to put their name on it. The senior advisor wrote, quote, certifying illegal votes. In turn, the participants of the group text message refused to have a statement regarding electors attributed to their names because none of them could, quote, stand by it. Also on December 13th, at a campaign staffer's request, co-conspirator 5 drafted and sent fraudulent electors certificates for Trump's electors in New Mexico, which had not previously been among the targeted states, and where there was no pending litigation on Trump's behalf. The next day, Trump's campaign filed an election challenge suit in New Mexico at 11:54 a.m., 6 minutes before the noon deadline for the electors' votes, as a pretext said that there was pending litigation there at the time the fraudulent electors voted. On December 14th, the legitimate electors of all 50 states and the District of Columbia met in their respective jurisdictions to formally cast their votes for president, resulting in a total of 232 electoral votes for Trump and 306 for Biden. The legitimate electoral votes that Biden won in the states that Trump targeted and his margin of defeat were as follows: Arizona, 11 electoral votes, 10,457 actual votes; Georgia, 16 electoral votes, 11,779 votes; Michigan, 16 electoral votes, 154,108 actual votes; Nevada, 6 electoral votes, 33,596 actual votes; New Mexico, 5 electoral votes, 99,720 actual votes; Pennsylvania, 20 electoral votes, 80,555 actual votes; and Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes, 20,682 actual votes. On the same day, at the direction of Trump and co-conspirator 1, fraudulent electors convened sham proceedings in the 7 targeted states to cast fraudulent electoral ballots in favor of Trump. In some states, in order to satisfy legal requirements set forth for legitimate electors under state law, state officials were enlisted to provide the fraudulent electors access to state capitol buildings so that they could gather and vote there. In many cases, however, as co-conspirator 5 had predicted in the fraudulent elector instructions, the fraudulent electors were unable to satisfy the legal requirements. Nonetheless, as directed in the fraudulent elector instructions, shortly after the fraudulent electors met on December 14th, the targeted states' fraudulent elector certificates were mailed to the President of the Senate, the Archivist of the United States, and others. Trump and co-conspirators ultimately used the certificates of the fraudulent electors to deceitfully target the government function, and did so contrary to how fraudulent electors were told they would be used. Unlike those of the fraudulent electors consistent with the ECA, the legitimate electors' signed certificates were annexed to the state executive certificates of ascertainment before being sent to the President of the Senate and others. That evening, at 6:26 p.m., the RNC chairwoman forwarded to Trump, through his executive assistant, an email titled Electors Recap Final, which represented that in 6 contested states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, Trump's electors had voted in parallel to Biden's electors. Trump's executive assistant responded, "It's in front of him." The defendants attempt to leverage the Justice Department to use deceit to get state officials to replace legitimate electors and electoral votes with the defendants' knowledge, I'm guessing. In late December 2020, Trump attempted to use the Justice Department to make knowingly false claims of election fraud to officials in the targeted states through a formal letter under the acting Attorney General's signature, thus giving his lies the backing of the federal government and attempting to improperly influence the targeted states to replace legitimate Biden electors with his. On December 22nd, Trump met with co-conspirator 4 at the White House. Co-conspirator 4 had now informed his leadership at the Justice Department of the meeting, which was a violation of the Justice Department's written policy restricting contacts with the White House to guard against improper political influence. On December 26, co-conspirator 4 spoke on the phone with the acting Attorney General and lied about the circumstances of the meeting with Trump at the White House, falsely claiming that the meeting had been unplanned. The acting Attorney General directed co-conspirator 4 not to have unauthorized contacts with the White House again, and co-conspirator 4 said he would not. The next morning, on December 27th, contrary to the acting Attorney General's direction, co-conspirator 4 spoke with Trump on Trump's cell phone for nearly 3 minutes. That afternoon, Trump called the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General and said, among other things, quote, "People tell me co-conspirator 4 is great. I should put him in," end quote. Trump also raised multiple false claims of election fraud, which the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General refuted. When the acting Attorney General told Trump that the Justice Department could not and would not change the outcome of the election, he responded, quote, "Just say that the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressmen," end quote. Just say that the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me. On December 28th, co-conspirator 4 sent a draft letter to the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General, which he proposed they all signed. The draft was addressed to state officials in Georgia, and co-conspirator 4 proposed sending versions of the letter to elected officials in other targeted states. The proposed letter contained numerous knowingly false claims about the election and the Justice Department, including that A. The Justice Department had, quote, "identified significant concerns that may have impacted the outcome of the election in multiple states," end quote. B. The Justice Department believed that in Georgia and other states, 2 valid slates of electors had gathered at the proper location on December 14th, and that both sets of ballots had been transmitted to Congress. That is, co-conspirator 4's letters sought to advance Trump's fraudulent elector plan by using the authority of the Justice Department to falsely present the fraudulent electors as a valid alternative to the legitimate electors. And C. The Justice Department urged that the state's legislature convene a special legislative session to create the opportunity to, among other things, choose the fraudulent electors over the legitimate electors. The acting Deputy Attorney General promptly responded to co-conspirators 4 by email and told him that his proposed letter was false, writing, quote, "Despite dramatic claims to the contrary, we have not seen the type of fraud that calls into question the reported and certified results of the election," end quote. In a meeting shortly thereafter, the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General again directed co-conspirator 4 not to have unauthorized contact with the White House. On December 31st, Trump summoned to the Oval Office the acting Attorney General, acting Deputy Attorney General, and other advisors. In the meeting, he again raised claims about election fraud that Justice Department officials already had told him were not true, and that the senior Justice Department officials reiterated were false, and suggested that he might change the leadership in the Justice Department. On January 2nd, 2021, just 4 days before Congress certification proceeding, co-conspirator 4 tried to coerce the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General to sign and send co-conspirator 4's draft letter, which contained false statements to state officials. He told them that Trump was considering making co-conspirator 4 the new acting Attorney General, but that co-conspirator 4 would decline his offer if the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General would agree to send the proposed letter to the targeted states. The Justice Department's officials refused. The next morning, on January 3rd, despite having uncovered no additional evidence of election fraud, co-conspirator 4 sent to a Justice Department colleague an edited version of his draft letter to the states, which included a change from its previous claim that the Justice Department had concerns to a stronger false claim that, quote, "As of today, there was evidence of significant irregularities that may have impacted the outcome of the election in multiple states," end quote. Also in the morning, January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 met with Trump at the White House again, without having informed senior Justice Department officials, and accepted his offer that he become acting Attorney General. On the afternoon of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 spoke with the Deputy White House Counsel. The previous month, the Deputy White House Counsel had informed the defendant that, quote, "There was no option in which you do not leave the White House on January 20th, end quote. Now, the same Deputy White House Counsel tried to dissuade co-conspirator 4 from assuming the role of acting Attorney General. The deputy White House counsel reiterated to co-conspirator 4 that there had not been outcome-determinative fraud in the election, and that if Trump remained in office nonetheless, there would be, quote, riots in every major city in the United States, end quote. Co-conspirator 4 responded, quote, well, deputy White House counsel, that's why there's an Insurrection Act, end quote. If you know what the Insurrection Act does, you know if you know. Also that afternoon, co-conspirator 4 met with the acting attorney general and told him that Trump had decided to put co-conspirator 4 in charge of the Justice Department. The acting attorney general responded that he would not accept being fired by a subordinate and immediately scheduled a meeting with Trump on that evening. On the evening of January 3rd, Trump met for a briefing on an overseas national security issue with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and other senior national security advisors. The chairman briefed him on the issue which had previously arisen in December, as well as possible ways he could handle it. The chairman and other advisors recommended that he take no action because Inauguration Day was only 17 days away, and any course of action could trigger something unhelpful. Trump calmly agreed, stating, yeah, you're right, it's too late for us, we're going to give that to the next guy. Trump moved immediately from this national security briefing to the meeting that the acting attorney general had requested earlier that day, which included co-conspirator 4, the acting attorney general, the acting deputy attorney general, the Justice Department's assistant attorney general for the Office of Legal Counsel, the White House counsel, a deputy White House counsel, and a senior advisor. At the meeting, Trump expressed frustration with the acting attorney general for failing to do anything to overturn the election results, and the group discussed co-conspirator 4's plan to investigate purported election fraud and to send his proposed letter to state officials, a copy of which was provided to Trump during the meeting. Trump relented in his plan to replace the acting attorney general with co-conspirator 4 only when he was told that it would result in mass resignations at the Justice Department and his own White House counsel. At the meeting in the Oval Office on the night of January 3rd, co-conspirator 4 suggested that the Justice Department should opine that the Vice President could exceed his lawful authority during the certification proceeding and change the election outcome. When the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel began to explain why the Justice Department should not do so, Trump said, quote, no one here should be talking to the Vice President. I'm talking to the Vice President, end quote, and ended the discussion. The defendant's attempts to enlist the Vice President to fraudulently alter the election results at the January 6th certification proceeding. As the January 6th congressional certification proceeding approached and other efforts to impale, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function failed, Trump sought to enlist the Vice President, Mike Pence, to use the ceremonial role at the certification to fraudulently alter the election results. Trump did this first by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to convince the Vice President to accept his fraudulent electors, reject legitimate electoral votes, or send legitimate electoral votes to state legislators for review rather than count them. When that failed, he attempted to use a crowd of supporters that he had gathered in Washington, D.C. to pressure the Vice President to fraudulently alter the election results. On December 19, 2020, after cultivating widespread anger and resentment for weeks with his knowingly false claims of election fraud, Trump urged his supporters to travel to Washington on the day of his certification proceeding, tweeting, quote, big protests in D.C. on January 6. Be there. We'll be wild, end quote. Throughout late December, he repeatedly urged his supporters to come to Washington for January 6. On January 23rd, Trump retweeted a memo titled Operation Pence Code, which falsely asserted that Pence could, among other things, unilaterally disqualify legitimate electors from 6 targeted states. On the same day, co-conspirator 2 circulated a 2-page memorandum outlining a plan for the Vice President to unlawfully declare Trump the certified winner of the presidential election. In the memorandum, co-conspirator 2 claimed that 7 states had transmitted 2 slates of electors and proposed that the Vice President announce that, quote, because of the ongoing disputes in the 7 states, there are no electors that can be deemed validly appointed in those states, end quote. Next, co-conspirator 2's proposed steps that he acknowledged violated the ECA, advocating that in the end, quote, Pence then gavels President Trump is re-elected, end quote. Just 2 months earlier, on October 11th, co-conspirator 2 had taken the opposite position, writing that neither the Constitution nor the ECA provided the Vice President discretion in the counting of electoral votes or permitted him to, quote, make the determination on his own, end quote. Basically admitting that this was all whack and wouldn't work. But we'll get even into that more. On several private phone calls in late December and early January, Trump appeared knowingly false claims of election fraud and directly pressured the Vice President to use his ceremonial role at the certification proceeding on January 6 to fraudulently overturn the results of the election, and the Vice President resisted, including A. On December 25th, when the Vice President called Trump to wish him a Merry Christmas, Trump quickly turned the conversation to January 6 and his request that the vice president reject the electoral votes that day. Mike Pence pushed back, telling him, as the vice president had already had in previous conversations, I don't think I have the authority to change the outcome. B. On December 29th, as reflected in Mike Pence's contemporaneous notes, Trump falsely told Pence that the Justice Department was finding major infractions, which, as we just saw, they were not. On January 1st, Trump called Mike Pence and berated him because he had learned that Pence had opposed a lawsuit seeking a judicial decision that, at the certification, Pence had the authority to reject or return votes to states under the Constitution. Pence responded that he thought there was no constitutional basis for such authority and that it was improper. In response, Trump told Pence, quote, "You're too honest," end quote. Within hours of the conversation, Trump reminded his supporters to meet in Washington before the certification proceeding, tweeting, quote, "The big protest rally in Washington, D.C. will take place at 11 a.m. on January 6th. Locational details to follow. Hashtag stop the steal." You're too honest. Once again, another hard-hitting quote. D. On January 3rd, Trump again told the vice president that at the certification proceeding, the vice president had the absolute right to reject electoral votes and the ability to overturn the election. Pence responded that he had no such authority and that a federal appeals court had rejected the lawsuit making that claim the previous day. On January 3rd, co-conspirator 2 circulated a second memorandum that included a new plan under which, contrary to the ECA, the vice president would send the elector slates to the state legislators to determine which slate to count. On January 4th, Trump held a meeting with co-conspirator 2, the vice president, the vice president's chief of staff, and the vice president's counsel for the purpose of convincing the vice president, based on Trump's knowingly false claims of election fraud, that he should reject or send to the states Biden's legitimate electoral votes rather than count them. Trump deliberately excluded the White House counsel from the meeting because the White House counsel previously had pushed back on his false claims of election fraud. During the meeting, as reflected in Pence's contemporaneous notes, Trump made knowingly false claims of election fraud, including, "Bottom line, won every state by hundred thousands of votes," and "We won every state," and as regarding a claim that his senior Justice Department officials previously had told him was false, including, as recently as the night before, "What about 205,000 votes more in Pennsylvania than voters?" Trump and co-conspirator 2 then asked Pence to either unilaterally reject the legitimate electors from the 7 targeted states, or to send the question of which slate was legitimate to the targeted states' legislators. When Pence challenged co-conspirator 2 on whether the proposal to return the question to the states was defensible, co-conspirator 2 responded, "Well, nobody's tested it before." The vice president then told Trump, "Did you hear that? Even your own counsel is not saying I have that authority." He responded, "That's okay. I prefer the other suggestion," of the vice president rejecting the electors unilaterally. Also on January 4th, when co-conspirator 2 acknowledged to Trump's senior advisor that no court would support his proposal, the senior advisor told co-conspirator 2, "They're going to cause riots in the streets." Co-conspirator 2 responded that there had previously been points in the nation's history where violence was necessary to protect the republic. After that conversation, the senior advisor notified the defendant that co-conspirator 2 had considered that his plan was not going to work. On the morning of January 5th, at Trump's direction, the vice president's chief of staff and the vice president's counsel met again with co-conspirator 2. Co-conspirator 2 now advocated that Pence do what Trump had said he preferred the day before, unilaterally reject electors from the targeted states. During this meeting, co-conspirator 2 privately acknowledged to the vice president's counsel that he hoped to prevent judicial review of his proposal because he understood that it would be unanimously rejected by the Supreme Court, aka 9-0. The vice president's counsel expressed to co-conspirator 2 that following through with the proposal would result in a disastrous situation where the election might have to be decided in the streets. That same day, Trump encouraged supporters to travel to Washington on January 6th, and he set the false expectation that Pence had the authority to and might use the ceremonial role at the certification proceeding to reverse the election outcome in his favor, including issuing the following tweets. A. At 11:06 a.m. The vice president has the power to reject fraudulently chosen electors. This was within 40 minutes of the defense earlier reminder. See you in D.C. B. At 5:05 p.m. Washington is being inundated with people who don't want to see an election victory stolen. Our country has had enough. They won't take it anymore. We hear you and love you from the Oval Office. C. At 5:43 p.m., I will be speaking at the Save America rally tomorrow on the Ellipse at 11 a.m. Eastern. Arrive early. Doors open at 7 a.m. Eastern. Big crowds. Also, oh Jesus. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Also, on January 5th, Trump met along with the vice president. When Pence refused to agree to his request that he obstruct the certification, Trump grew frustrated and told Pence that he would have to publicly criticize him. Upon learning of this, Pence's chief of staff was concerned for the vice president's safety and alerted the head of the vice president's Secret Service detail. As crowds began to gather in Washington and were audible from the Oval Office, Trump remarked to advisors that the crowd the following day on January 6th was going to be angry. That night, Trump approved and caused his campaign to issue a public statement that he knew from his meeting with Pence only hours earlier was false. Quote, "The vice president and I are in total agreement that the vice president has the power to act," end quote. On January 6th, starting in the early morning hours, Trump again turned to knowingly false statements aimed at pressuring the vice president to fraudulently alter the election outcome and raised publicly the false expectation that the vice president might do so. A. At 1 a.m., Trump issued a tweet that falsely claimed, quote, "If Vice President at Mike_Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. Many states want to decertify the mistake they made in certifying incorrect and even fraudulent numbers in a process not approved by their state legislators, which it must be. Mike can send it back." B. At 8:17 a.m., Trump issued a tweet that falsely said, quote, "States want to correct their votes, which they now know were based on irregularities and fraud, plus corrupt process never received legislative approval. All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states, and we win. Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage." End quote. On the morning of January 6th, an agent of Trump contacted a United States senator to ask him to hand deliver documents to the vice president. The agent that facilitated the receipt by the senator's staff of the fraudulent certificates signed by Trump's fraudulent electors in Michigan and Wisconsin, which were believed not to have been delivered to the vice president or archivist by mail. When one of the senator's staffers contacted the staffer for the vice president by text message to arrange for the delivery of what the senator's staffers had been told were alternate slates of electors from Michigan and Wisconsin because archivists didn't receive them, the vice president's staffer rejected them. At 11:15 a.m., Trump called the vice president and again pressured him to fraudulently reject or return Biden's legitimate electoral votes. The vice president again refused. Immediately after the call, Trump decided to single out the vice president in public remarks he could make within the hour, inserting language that he had personally drafted earlier that morning, falsely claiming that the vice president had authority to send electoral votes to the states, but that advisors had previously successfully advocated be removed. Earlier that morning, Trump had selected co-conspirator 2 to join co-conspirator 1 in giving public remarks before his own. When they did so, based on knowingly false election fraud claims, co-conspirator 1 and co-conspirator 2 intensified pressure on vice president to fraudulently obstruct the certification proceeding. A. Co-conspirator 1 told the crowd that the vice president could, quote, "cast the ACA aside," end quote, and unilaterally, quote, "decide on the validity of these crooked ballots," end quote. He also lied when he claimed to, quote, "have letters from 5 legislators begging us," end quote, to send elected slates to the legislators for review, and called for, quote, "trial by combat," end quote. Good old Rudy Giuliani, though, so you know. Co-conspirator 2, John Eastman, as I now know for a fact, quote, "all we are demanding of Vice President Pence is this afternoon at 1 o'clock he let the legislators of the state look into this so we can get to the bottom of it, and the American people know whether we have control of the direction of our government or not. We no longer live in a self-governing republic if we can't get the answer to this question," end quote. Next, beginning at 11:56 a.m., Trump made multiple knowingly false statements integral to his criminal plans to defeat the federal government function, obstruct the certification, and interfere with others' rights to vote and have their votes counted. Trump repeated false claims of election fraud, gave false hopes that the vice president might change the election outcome, and directed the crowd in front of him to go to the Capitol as a means to obstruct the certification and pressure the vice president to fraudulently observe the certification. He knowingly made false statements for these purposes, including A. Trump falsely claimed that based on fraud, the vice president could alter the outcome of the election results, stating, "I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. All he has to do, all this is, This is from the number one, or certainly one of the top, constitutional lawyers in our country. He has the absolute right to do it. We're supposed to protect our country, support our Constitution, and protect our Constitution. States want to revote. The states got defrauded. They were given false information. They voted on it. Now they want to recertify. They want it back. All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify, and we become president, and you are the happiest people. B. After Trump falsely stated that the Pennsylvania legislature wanted to, quote, recertify their votes, they want to recertify, but the only way that can happen is if Pence agrees to send it back, end quote. The crowd began to chant, send it back. C. Trump also said that irregular rules no longer applied, saying, quote, and fraud breaks up everything, doesn't it? When you catch somebody in a fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules, end quote. D. Finally, after exhorting that, quote, we fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore, end quote. Trump directed the people in front of him to head to the Capitol, suggested he was going with them, and told them to give members of Congress, quote, the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country, end quote. During and after the defendant's remarks, thousands of people marched towards the Capitol. The defendant's exploitation of the violence and chaos at the Capitol. Shortly before 1 p.m., the Vice President issued a public statement explaining that his role as President of the Senate at the certification proceeding that was about to begin did not include, quote, unilateral authority to determine which electoral votes should be counted and which should not, end quote. Before Trump had finished speaking, a crowd began to gather at the Capitol. Thereafter, a mass of people, including individuals who had traveled to Washington into the Capitol at Trump's direction, broke through barriers, cordoning off the Capitol grounds and advanced on the Capitol building, including by violently attacking law enforcement officers trying to secure it. Trump, who had returned to the White House after concluding his remarks, watched events at the Capitol unfold on the television in the dining room next to the Oval Office. At 2:13 p.m., after more than an hour of steady, violent advancement, the crowd at the Capitol broke into the building. Upon receiving news that individuals had breached the Capitol, Trump's advisors told him that there was a riot there and that rioters had breached the building. When advisors urged him to issue a calming message aimed at the rioters, he refused, instead repeatedly remarking that the people at the Capitol were angry because the election had been stolen. At 2:24 p.m., after advisors had left Trump alone in the dining room, he issued a tweet intended to further delay and obstruct the certification. Quote, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to recertify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth, end quote. 1 minute later, at 2:25 p.m., the U.S. Secret Service was forced to evacuate the Vice President to a secure location. At the Capitol, throughout the afternoon, members of the crowd chanted, hang Mike Pence, where is Pence, bring him out, and traitor Pence. Trump repeatedly refused to approve a message directing rioters to leave the Capitol, as urged by his most senior advisors, including the White House counsel, a deputy White House counsel, the chief of staff, a deputy chief of staff, and a senior advisor. And instead, he issued 2 tweets that did not ask rioters to leave the Capitol, but instead falsely suggested that the crowd at the Capitol was being peaceful, including A. At 2:38 p.m., please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful. And B. At 3:13 p.m., I am asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you. At 3 p.m., Trump had a phone call with the minority leader of the United States House of Representatives, McCarthy. He told the minority leader that the crowd at the Capitol was more upset about the election than the minority leader was. At 4:17 p.m., Trump released a video message on Twitter that he had just taped in the White House Rose Garden. In it, he repeated the knowingly false claim that we had an election that was stolen from us, and finally asked individuals to leave the Capitol while telling that they were very special and that we love you. After the 4:17 p.m. tweet, as Trump joined others in the outer Oval Office to watch the attack on the Capitol on television, he said, quote, see, this is what happens when they try to steal an election. These people are angry. These people are really angry about it. This is what happens, end quote. At 6:01 p.m., Trump tweeted, quote, these are things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and peace, and in peace. Remember this day forever, end quote. On the evening of January 6, Trump and co-conspirator 1 attempted to exploit the violence and chaos at the Capitol by calling lawmakers to convince them, based on knowingly false claims of election fraud, to delay the certification, including A. Trump, through White House aides, attempted to reach 2 U.S. state senators at 6 p.m. B. From 6:59 p.m. until 7:18 p.m., co-conspirator 1 placed calls to 5 U.S. senators and 1 U.S. representative. C. Co-conspirator 6 attempted to confirm phone numbers for 6 U.S. senators whom Trump had directed co-conspirator 1 to call and attempted to enlist in further delaying the certification. D. In one of the calls, co-conspirator 1 left a voicemail intended for a U.S. senator that said, quote, "We need you, O Republican friends, to try to just slow it down so we can get these legislators to get more information to you. And I know they're reconvening at 8 tonight, but the only strategy we can follow is to object to numerous states and raise issues so that we can get ourselves into tomorrow, ideally until the end of tomorrow," end quote. If I'm not wrong, that is a call from Giuliani that was meant to be for Mike Lee, but instead got picked up by someone else. I forget the specific Congress member's name. E. In another message intended for another U.S. senator, co-conspirator 1 repeated knowingly false allegations of election fraud, including that the vote counts certified by the states to Congress were incorrect and that the governors who had certified knew they were incorrect, that illegal immigrants have voted in substantial numbers in Arizona, and that Georgia gave you a number which 65,000 people who were underage voted. Co-conspirator 1 also claimed that the vice president's actions had been surprising and asked the Senate to object to every state and kind of spread this out a little bit like a filibuster. At 7:01 p.m., while co-conspirator 1 was calling United States senators on behalf of Trump, the White House counsel called Trump to ask him to withdraw any objections and allow the certification. He refused. The attack on the Capitol obstructed and delayed the certification for approximately 6 hours until the Senate and House of Representatives came back into the session separately at 8:06 p.m. and 9:02 p.m. respectively, and came together in a joint session at 11:35 p.m. At 11:44 p.m., co-conspirator 2 emailed the Vice President's counsel advocating that the Vice President violate the law and seek further delay of the certification. Co-conspirator 2 wrote, quote, "I implore you to consider one more relatively minor violation of the ACA and adjourn for 10 days to allow the legislators to finish their investigations, as well as to allow a full forensic audit of the massive amount of illegal activity that has occurred here," end quote. At 3:41 a.m. on January 7th, as President of the Senate, the Vice President, Mike Pence, announced the certified results of the 2020 presidential election in favor of Biden. Trump and his co-conspirators committed one or more of the acts to affect the object of the conspiracy alleged above in paragraphs 13, 15 to 16, 18 to 22, 24, 26, 28, 30 to 33, 35, 37 to 39, 41, 43 to 44, 46, 50, 52, 54, 56, 57 to 64, 67, 71, 75, 78 to 82, 84, 85, 87 to 97, 99 to 100, 102 to 104, 111, 114, 116, 118 to 119, and 122. In violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 371. Count 2! Thank God there's only 4 counts here. One count of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, 18 U.S.C. Section 1512K, 18 U.S.C. Section 1512K. We looked at this for the Mar-a-Lago case, so we will be skipping this. Please do watch the Mar-a-Lago video so you know what this is actually about, or you can just look up 18 U.S.C. 1512K, blah blah blah. Okay. Basically, anything within this, if anyone does any of these, whoever conspires to commit any offense under this section shall be subject to the same penalties as those prescribed for the offense, the commission of which was the object of the conspiracy. So basically saying, hey, if you break any of these, you basically face whatever the punishment is. So, just watch the Mar-a-Lago document video so you know all of those possible things. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 and 8 through 123 of this indictment are re-alleged and fully incorporated here by reference. Basically, everything I said back in count 1, in paragraphs 1 to 4, and 8 to 123 are basically part of count 2. That way they don't have to keep putting it over and over and over again. So, they're re-alleged, fully incorporated here by reference. From on or about November 14th, 2020 through on or about January 7th, 2021, and the District of Columbia and elsewhere, Trump did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators, known and unknown to the grand jury, to corruptly obstruct and impede an official proceeding. That is the certification of the electoral vote in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1512, C2, in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1512. Okay. Count 3. One count of obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, 18 U.S.C. subsection 1512 C22. 18 U.S.C. subsection 1512 C22. Then we're back all the way with the last one, but instead, now we have whoever corruptly otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding or attempts to do so shall be fined under this title or in prison not more than 20 years or both. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 and 8 through 123 in this indictment are realleged and fully incorporated here by reference, just like count 2. From on or about November 14, 2020, through on or about January 7, 2021, in the District of Columbia and elsewhere, Trump attempted to and did corruptly obstruct and impede an official proceeding, that is, the certification of the electoral vote, in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Sections 1512 C22. Count 4. One count of conspiracy against rights, 18 U.S.C. Section 241. 18 U.S.C. Section 241. If two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or because of his having so exercised the same, or if two or more persons go in disguise on the highway or on the premises of another with intent to prevent or hinder his free exercise of enjoyment of any right or privilege so secured. Wait a second. If two or more persons go in disguise on the highway... No, never mind. Count 4. The allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 4 and 8 through 123 of this indictment are realleged and fully incorporated here by reference. From on or about November 14, 2020 through on or about January 20, 2021, in the District of Columbia and elsewhere, Trump attempted to and did corruptly obstruct and impede an official proceeding, that is, the certification of the electoral vote, in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Sections 1512 C22. Finally, we are done. Almost. The summary. Trump engaged in conspiracies to defraud the U.S. federal government as it collected, counted, and certified the 2020 election, obstruct and impede the January 6th congressional proceeding, which the results of the 2020 election were counted and certified, and against one's right to vote. All of these were done by illegal means by Trump, along with co-conspirators unknown to the grand jury. All of this was done so Trump would maintain his position of power as President of the United States against the will of the people of the United States of the legal proceeding to decide said President of the United States. TLDR, lots of crimes committed to undo the results of the 2020 election. And that is the charges. Finally, post-indictment releasing. In August 2023, Chuck can sit trial for March 4th, 2024. On August 4th and 5th, the special counsel filed motions asking the court to restrict Trump from making public statements about the case and to impose a protective order on Trump and his attorneys to prevent them from revealing evidence. Chuck scheduled a hearing for August 11th. At that August 11th hearing, Chuckin issued a less broad protective order than what was sought by prosecutors who wanted to lock down all evidence turned over in discovery. The protective order allowed Trump to access certain non-sensitive information. She admonished Trump's attorneys that inflammatory public remarks by the former president would cause her to take measures to expedite the trial and prevent potential witness tampering and jury pool tainting. She emphasized that Trump's status as a criminal defendant had priority over his free speech as a political candidate. Chuckin ruled Trump could review materials alone, but only if his attorneys ensured he did not have any device that could copy them. Originally, all pretrial motions were due by October 9th. On September 28th, Trump's attorneys requested a 60-day extension, and on October 6th, Chuckin extended the filing deadline for motions to dismiss and other depositive motions, except motions in limine and motions to suppress, until October 23rd. Court documents released on September 15th show that special counsel previously asked Judge Chuckin in sealed briefs to impose a narrowly tailored gag order on Trump, asserting that since his indictment, he has put disparaging and inflammatory public posts on Truth Social on a near daily basis regarding the citizens of the District of Columbia, the court, prosecutors, and prospective witnesses. On October 16th, following a hearing, Chuckin granted a limited gag order. The gag order prohibits all parties from making public statements targeting Jack Smith or his staff, the defense counsel or their staff, the judge or court personnel, and any potential witnesses or the substance of witness testimony with smears, intimidation, or harassment. The gag order does not prohibit Trump from making statements criticizing the Biden admin. The Justice Department the District of Columbia, other presidential candidates, and the political platforms, and the conduct of the trial as being unfair or politically motivated. On December 7th, Trump asked the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals to decide whether he is immune from prosecution. On February 2nd, 2024, Judge Tanya Chutkan said she would not schedule a trial until the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals decides whether Trump is immune from prosecution. On February 6th, a panel of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously ruled that Trump is not immune. The case was then appealed to the Supreme Court, which scheduled oral arguments for April 25th, 2024. Chutkan paused deadline to the case, and we know, or at least I know, how that case went. You probably know somewhat about how the case went. I probably already talked about it in the Manifesto, so. On December 8th, the three-judge panel on the appeals court mostly upheld the gag order. The court ruled that Trump cannot speak about prosecutors, court staff, or their families. However, Trump may speak about witnesses as long as he doesn't speak specifically about their participation in the court case. He's also free to speak about special counsel Jack Smith, President Joe Biden, and the Justice Department, and he's allowed to say that the charges are politically motivated. Trump has to reconsider, met with a no, and he might appeal to the Supreme Court, though he has not as of now. On October 5th, 2023, Trump's attorneys filed a motion in the federal prosecution case to dismiss the indictment. On December 1st, Chutkan rejected the October 5th motion to dismiss under presidential immunity and the October 23rd motion to dismiss. On January 9th, 2024, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit heard arguments in the immunity dispute. The three-judge panel included J. Michelle Childs, Florence Y. Pan, and Karen L. Henderson. In response to a hypothetical question posed by Judge Rand about whether a U.S. president could order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, Sarah, Trump's representative for the hearing, argued that unless the president was subsequently impeached and convicted for said unlawful order, the president could not be criminally prosecuted. Judge Pan pointed out that if there was any circumstance in which a president can be criminally prosecuted, in this hypothetical, after being convicted by the Senate, the president's immunity is not absolute. Judge Henderson added, "I think it's paradoxical to say that Trump's constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed allows him to violate criminal laws." The Supreme Court seemingly did not see the same, but hey, what do I know? On February 6th, the Circuit Court of Appeals panel unanimously affirmed the district court ruling. On February 12th, Trump's attorneys filed a motion requesting that the Supreme Court block the appeals court ruling. On February 28th, the Supreme Court granted a writ of certiorari for Trump's appeal and subsequently scheduled oral arguments for April 25th. Oral arguments for the 25th subsequently concluded with an apparent split in the justices' views on the current outlook. Judge Chutkan ruled Trump must be present all days of the trial, leading to lots of controversy as he won't be able to attend Barron's graduation or campaign. Mike Pence issued a statement strongly condemning Trump, saying that this indictment was, quote, an important reminder that anyone who puts himself with the Constitution should never be president of the United States, end quote. In an interview with reporters at the Indiana State Fair the next day, he expanded on his comments, saying that he could not have overturned the election results as vice president. Former U.S. Attorney General William Barr said the case against Trump was legitimate and that he would testify if he is called. Adam Kinzinger, a member of the January 6th committee and a former Illinois representative, tweeted that, quote, today is the beginning of justice, end quote, and now that Trump is, quote, a cancer on our democracy, end quote. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie said Trump, quote, swore an oath to the Constitution, violated his oath, and brought shame to his presidency, end quote. Former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson said, quote, Trump has disqualified himself from ever holding our nation's highest office again, end quote. On August 14, 2023, nearly a dozen former judges and federal legal officials, all appointed by Republicans, submitted an amicus brief saying they agree with Jack Smith's proposed trial date of January 2, 2024. The brief states, quote, there is no more important issue facing America and the American people, and to the very functioning of democracy, than whether the former president is guilty of criminally undermining America's elections and American democracy in order to remain in power, end quote. Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, tweeted that he would not, quote, end the weaponization of government, replace the FBI director, and ensure a single standard of justice for all Americans, end quote. If elected, he also voiced agreement with the defense claim that the charges were politically motivated. In addition, DeSantis has previously expressed his intention to pardon Trump if he were to win the presidency, of which he is not, and will not. Then Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy wrote on X that House Republicans would, quote, continue to uncover the truth about Biden, Inc. and the two-tiered system of justice, end quote. If you read my manifesto, you already know how that went, aka nowhere. With a looming September 30th deadline to fund the government for the coming fiscal year starting October 1st, some House Republicans have proposed leveraging their power of the purse to try to stop the federal and state prosecutions of Trump, though a federal shutdown would not affect the prosecutions. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, in a joint statement with House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries, said, quote, "No one is above the law, including Donald Trump," end quote. House members Nancy Pelosi, Joaquin Castro, and Rashida Tlaib also came out in support of the indictment. And that is post-indictment releasing. And finally, conclusions and final statements. Not that long. The main evidence will likely be testimony by unindicted co-conspirators and members of Trump's former cabinet, along with evidence gained during discovery, like potential messages or calls exchanged between Trump and his members. I also like to add all the evidence gained from the January 6th Commission, as they did gain a crap ton of it. Conservatives' main arguments against the indictment are the same as the RICO case, but somehow even less standing. Conservatives' main claim is that Jack Smith is politically persecuting Trump with no legal basis and using illegal means to do so. Conservatives' strongest evidence for this is, none. I'm serious. There is nothing here other than the fact he's indicting Trump. There is nothing. Conservatives' other claim is Trump's freedom of speech is being violated. This, however, too holds little water. Main evidence here is all the tweets and statements from Trump being used as evidence against him in the case. Conservatives claim this proves Trump's freedom of speech is 1. Being violated, and 2. Being the reason he's charged. Neither are true. As per the first, multiple courts and legal bodies have reviewed and rejected this, including the appeals court. And as per the second, this is just wrong at best and a lie at worst. The tweets or statements aren't the reason for the charges. The immunity used as a piece of evidence, along with over 100 actions, to point towards the fact that Trump was knowingly making false claims to stay president. As of now, this indictment has been replaced with another to fit the immunity ruling, so it's just back to waiting on what the court will decide on. This means it will be impossible to wrap this up and give any sentencing or conviction before the election. Just know that if Trump wins his election case, or that if Trump wins, he can dismiss all of this. Every bit, every crumb of evidence, everything. If Trump wins, he is legally allowed to dismiss federal prosecutions against him. And he will. We know he will. So if any of this moved you in any way, or if you feel that because of this that Trump is unfit to hold office in any way, shape, or form, I implore you to get out and vote for Kamala Harris to beat Trump and ensure that he does not regain power and never sees the light of justice. Now, with this is a bit different because there's other things I want to include here, such as a Obsidian Notes document by a popular YouTube creator, Destiny, that has compiled a bunch of the January 6th stuff, which I have also used as the main basis for my January 6th section, which goes basically hand in hand with this indictment. Another thing is that new indictment that I mentioned to replace this one. That is a new indictment that Jack Smith released after the immunity decision, basically to respond to all the claims made within that document by the Supreme Court, and changing any bits of his case that would have to be changed, or removing any bits, adding new bits. Within that, it seems that there were many more new statements and pieces of evidence that have released. So, instead of going to the next indictment, I will be going through, firstly, the Obsidian doc, and then nextly, the new indictment. So, stay tuned for that one. Bye. And have a good day.